All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all our viewers. Welcome to the 2021 JobStreet Virtual Career Fair, your springboard to a brighter future. And today we'll be hosting a webinar. And my name is Shireen. I am your host for today. Thank you, JobStreet, for giving us this opportunity to talk to industry experts and specialists. And this will certainly help the many job seekers out there to understand the different aspects of various industries and hopefully secure your dream job. So, without further ado, allow me to introduce our guest all the way from Penang, Mr. Dave Mitchell, Vice President and General Manager for Manufacturing and Distribution of Boston Scientific. Welcome, Dave. Good morning.
Thank you, Shireen. Good morning to you. Thank you for having me, and thank you to the JobStreet team as well for hosting us.
How are you today, this morning?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Beautiful day in Penang and no rain, so that makes it a good start to the day.
Wonderful weather there, right?
Yeah.
Back to my old hometown in Penang. So, Dave, I'm sure many of our viewers will be very interested to know about yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do as well.
Okay, perfect. So as Shireen mentioned, my name is Dave Mitchell. I'm the VP or Managing Director of Boston Scientific's facility in Penang. And Boston Scientific is a large multinational company that designs, manufactures, and distributes medical devices. Okay, the products that we make are focused on saving people's lives or correcting a major health issue, a major illness. Okay, we're one of the biggest medical device companies in the world, and we sell our products really in about 100, almost 140 countries worldwide. So, very large company. Our factory and distribution center here in Penang is our first one in Asia, and I have been here living in Penang since 2016 when we started our company here.
Wow, that's wonderful, to hear the history behind and, the glorious works that we can have here in Malaysia and, particularly in Penang. Reading through your CV, you've had such an illustrious career as well in manufacturing and, within the industry. Perhaps, to share a little bit on how you started out and how have you grown your career within the manufacturing industry?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a great question. I've had a somewhat atypical career in that I've really moved around and done a lot of different things, right? So I'm an engineer by training. I started at Ford Motor Company, and I was designing car engines because as a
Oh,
hobby, really like to work on cars. So I worked there for 7 years and absolutely loved it. It was fantastic and really built my core engineering skills. From there, I did a bit of work in strategy and project management. Okay, so strategy around sort of long-term business planning in the auto industry, and then in other industries as a consultant. Okay, so working in with big consumer product companies like Procter and Gamble, for example. I really learned a lot about different industries there. But I really had a drive to move into the healthcare space. And almost 20 years ago, 19 and a half years ago, I joined Boston Scientific, right? A key player in the healthcare space. I saw it as an industry where there's growth, right? Healthcare is an industry that as the population grows, the population ages, and the population of the world, frankly, has more access to healthcare, that there will be industry growth and career growth. So that drove me into Boston Scientific, where I started working with all of our manufacturing systems, our automation that we use in our factories. Okay. And from there, my career has been an interesting, very global career, moving around both physically and moving around doing different things. With the culmination of ultimately selecting a site for our new factory that's here in Penang in 2015, and then taking the opportunity to move here with my family and start it. And I'm proud to say it's been extremely successful. Malaysia is a great place to do business. We've got about 1,000 employees here now.
wow, that's so interesting to hear how you started out and you graduated as an engineer, right?
Yeah,
And definitely throughout the world, especially in Malaysia, you will see there are so many aspects of engineering, right? There's material sciences, chemical,
sure.
electrical, mechanical, aerospace, and how did you manage to find that fit, moving from engineering into manufacturing?
Sure. Yeah, my background is very mechanical, right? Like I
Mm.
said, my hobbies. So I'm a very mechanical person. So mechanical engineering is what I majored in. Now, when I went to college, it was a long time ago. There was no biomedical engineering, right? Now you have far more options
Yes.
as a student, right? And
Mm.
even within the sciences, within business, there are just a lot more specializations that you can do, right? And so from there, I really, for my work at Ford, got exposed to manufacturing, got exposed to a lot of sort of program management, and just saw, hey, I like this. I like the strength. So I like the experience and built strength in it. It was less about exactly what my degree said and more about sort of starting out and then working, taking opportunities at companies to understand where I would be able to perform well and where I was interested, right? And both of those things need to come together, that you do well at what you do and that you enjoy what you do.
Enjoy what you do. I love that you say that. And, coming from the industry of manufacturing itself, where, it seems a little tough, rough and tough, and, you got to get your hands dirty and, put your hands into every aspects of day-to-day jobs, right? So,
Mm,
how did you grow your career,
mhm.
moving from the operational aspects into
Yep,
strategy, into business
yep.
planning, and growing, a company like Boston Scientific in Malaysia?
Sure, sure. Personally, I was not a person that would always work in the same function, right? I didn't see myself
Okay.
wanting to start out as an engineer, become an engineering manager, become an engineering director.
Uh,
I saw myself or I've enjoyed being a person who has worked across different things. So what drove me was really be always working to be on the steep part of the learning curve personally. So trying stuff that I knew would be fun, but that I knew would be really hard. And that when you're on that steep part of the learning curve, you grow very, very quickly, right? So I would drop into projects that were massive, lead projects that were massive, and very, very challenging work. But by the time I came out of it, I really had built a strength in that space, a deep strength, and then moved on to do something else, right? So that gave me, certainly very lucky at Boston Scientific, very broad exposure to different aspects of the business within operations, right? There's a lot of things, whether it's strategy,
mm,
systems, overall production management, finance. I mean, operations
yeah.
is a massive, massive organization, right?
Mm, wonderful. And talking about the steep learning curve, right? And I
Sure.
would say many of the job seekers will definitely face these at some points in their career and at many points in their career.
Yep.
What would be your advice to them, when they are facing this situation? How maybe share a little bit about your own experience. How did you overcome them?
Yeah, so I would say in general, my view is that people have more capability than they do confidence in their own capabilities, right? So my first message is you can do it, right? I moved into medical device industry, a big company, and I knew nothing about medicine. I was a car guy, right? I didn't know, frankly, what all the parts of the body were that our products treat, right? But companies will teach you that, right? You'll learn what you need to learn. It's okay to not know everything. You don't have to be a medical expert to work in a medical device company. You'll learn what you need to learn. 20 years on now, I know far more medically than I thought I would ever know, and I can have a conversation about it. And so don't be afraid of the learning curve, right? Just jump on it, and companies will give you what you need to be successful. You have to remember that your employer wants you to do well, right? Your employer wants you to learn and be successful because then the company can do well and be successful. So I encourage everybody to jump in and do it.
Love that piece of advice there, right? Because you got to take that bold step, that brave, courageous step, and discuss with your company, right, on how
Yeah,
you're going to grow
yeah,
your career, and it's not
exactly.
like a textbook answer, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Awesome, awesome. And one of the biggest challenges, I guess, many career men and women face is how do you convince an employer from another industry to take you on when you have no background of that industry?
Yeah. So first thing I would say is look at the data for us.
Mm,
Medical devices, while a big industry in Malaysia, compared to, for example, semiconductor, it's quite small.
mm,
So the vast majority of people that Boston Scientific and our peers, there are many good medical device companies that we hire aren't medical device experienced, right? They might
mm.
come from aerospace, from
Ah,
electronics, from
okay.
semiconductor, and that's okay, right? Those core skills you learn as an engineer or HR person or a finance person can work in lots of industries, right? If you come in knowing how to be an engineer or a technician,
Mm.
uh, you can learn how to be an engineer or a technician in the medical device space.
Mm, yeah, yeah. And I love what you said earlier. The company will definitely provide you the knowledge and the training, right?
Yep,
But the candidates or the employees themselves should have certain values and certain behaviors to match that learning curve, right?
yep, yep,
How would you advise them to steer this drive to learn?
yep. I think certainly in it, at any level of your career, the willingness to jump in and help out and just take on problems, right?
Mm,
So uh, to step back and look at what help the project or the company or whatever you're working on needs, and just figure out how to fill that gap, even if it
mm,
is not your exact job description, right? That's a huge value. We really like people who ask questions, right? So rather than say, okay, I'll do this, say, well, why should I do this? Or is there a better way to do it? So where we have challenging thinking,
mm.
or that sort of creative problem solving approach is fantastic. So we really encourage people to just be active, speak up, and try to help. Those are folks that really move along quickly from a career perspective.
Okay. I think that sort like boxes up and breaks the box of some of the myths, right? That operations and
That's right.
manufacturing and distribution,
That's right.
it's very SOP oriented. It's, you just have to follow the book and follow the procedures,
Yep.
but you
Yep.
need this creative thinking behind it as well. Right?
Yep.
Perhaps,
Yeah.
share with us a little bit more on that to attract and to enable job seekers out there, different forms of job seekers, that operations manufacturing is something to be considered as well.
Yeah, first of all, it's not like we come in and do the same thing every day, right? So
Ah,
there
okay.
are constant challenges in operations that require problem solving, creativity. It's a very fast environment. So, people that get energy from things moving quickly, operations is a fantastic place, right? There's always a lot of people around. There's
Yeah.
always a lot of product around, meaning, we're always making certainly a lot of volume. But basically, engineers and people that work in operations, we solve problems, right? So how do we make a product better? How do we deal with yield issues? How do we deal with quality issues? And those are projects that go all the way back to our corporate teams working on R&D, working on product improvements, right? So your scope, even though you work in operations, is very broad, very broad.
Ah,
We
okay.
also work very globally. So we have sister sites all over Europe and the US that we connect with. And many of our employees will travel there, take an assignment there, for several months, some even longer, and get that experience and bring back to Penang that expertise to help us do things differently, do better, make new products, et cetera. So in this industry, it's a very, very global approach, right?
Mm. All right. No, just one question top of my mind, with the breadth of the scope in operations, right? And with the current generation, with the millennials, the Gen Z, the
Sure.
Gen Zoomers,
Yep.
everyone's wanting to work for a tech company or a
Yep.
startup or an entrepreneurial company.
Yep.
How would you give advice to the younger generation that operations manufacturing is also just as valuable and just as sexy?
Yeah, no, it's great. I think people need to take a look, right? So by that I mean break the maybe the preconceived notion that manufacturing is dirty and heavy and hard
Mm,
and unsafe, right? We're making products that get implanted into people's bodies, right, into their hearts. So there are a few things that have a higher requirement for quality, for precision, for safety, and then the science behind right? So it's different than a software job, for example. But the science of how your body works and how to treat critical, life-threatening illnesses is fantastic, right? So I think it's high tech in a different way. You know, as a company, just to use Boston Scientific as an example, we have about 23,000 US patents, right? So we are a heavy technology company. We spend $1 billion US just over in R&D every year, right? And when you look at Penang, many of the medical device companies here in Malaysia are relatively young, right? So when we just started here 5 years ago, we moved into this building 4 years ago, and I tell people it's like a startup. It's just a startup with really good funding, right? Because we have a corporate parent who is investing in the growth. So you don't have the insecurity of it's a startup, is it going to survive, right? When you're dealing with companies who are new and coming to Malaysia in the space.
Yeah, that's really great, solid advice there. And it
Yeah,
really debunks the myths of, an operational industry, manufacturing
yep,
kind of,
yep,
realm.
yep.
So what are some non-negotiables that job seekers need to have in this industry? So, some really solid advice that will carry them through.
Yeah, that's a great question. And the absolute non-negotiable for us is quality and the focus on the patient, right?
Ah,
So
okay.
people need to come in and realize, feel good about the fact that you're making something that's going to save someone's life, right? The products that we make could be implanted into your neighbor, your mother, your brother, someone you work with. 40 million patients a year receive one of our devices, right? So that focus on quality and the patient is critical. When we make decisions, we don't make decisions worrying about cost, right? First, we make
Yeah.
decisions first worrying about, will this device work? Is it safe for the patient? So we will not cut corners on quality. We will not cut corners on doing the right thing when we are making a device to make sure that it works in the way that it's intended. So safety for the patient, that focus on the patient is non-negotiable. But
Mm.
I think people can people can adjust to that quite easily. Like when I talk to my parents about
Mm.
what I do and what makes my job different, that's the first topic. Everyone can align to the fact that if we're making something for the medical industry, it needs to be perfect, right? So it's not
Mm.
a it's probably an adjustment maybe from the industries that people used to work in, but I think you
Mm.
can get pretty excited about the fact that you want to make something perfect because it's going to be used on one of our fellow humans.
Yeah, and I think that's a great shift of perspective as well, right? Coming from an operational perspective where you think that, you're just in a factory with rows and rows of
Yeah,
conveyor belts
yeah,
versus now you are actually looking at the end result, right? Which is the
yeah,
patient, the consumer, and your
yeah,
target market, right?
yeah,
And that gives a higher level of passion for people to understand that in
absolutely.
operations, especially medical devices, you are not
Yeah,
there making a product, you're there saving lives
yeah. In
or
this
making lives
industry,
better.
yeah, in this industry, it's a bit of an identity, right? It's an
Mm,
identity within the medical device industry of, hey, we all the companies are there are lots of great companies, right?
yeah, yeah.
And all the companies have that same DNA of we want to
Mm,
make stuff that is perfect and that works for humans, right? And
mm,
the clinical and regulatory processes
yeah.
that are behind that are critical.
Yeah, yeah. I would like to ask one a little personal question, and I think a lot of job seekers will also face this. When I first graduated as a biomedical graduate, right, there
Yep.
seem to be very limited options, right? So it's either I pursue a degree in medical or dentistry, etc., or I move into, the research end, right, where I grow my career to become a professor one day, or
Yep.
eventually I end up in consumer goods companies, doing
Sure.
regulatory for them. So that was
Yep.
the narrow scope that we have here.
Yeah.
So perhaps you may want to share some advice to job seekers who come from a science background, like
Yep.
health sciences and all that.
Yep.
What are the opportunities they have within the operations industry,
Yeah,
right?
it's a
Medical
great question.
devices.
And I first of all, I think I mentioned when I went to university, there was no biomedical engineering, right?
Yeah. Yes.
I believe in the United States now, biomedical engineering is the number one engineering major. I
Mm,
believe it is the most popular. So
Mm,
that just shows you the shift and the growth in this segment of
mm,
healthcare, of medical devices, of pharma. It's been explosive, right? So it's a massive, massive industry, and so, but we employ lots of people who are not biomedical engineers, right?
mm,
We have to keep our plant running. We have things like chemists, we have things like
mm,
microbiologists, we have biologists, we have lots of finance, HR, IT people, right?
mm,
If you're want to work in high tech and you want to do apps, we have app development people, right? If you're want to build applications for running production, we have people that do that. We have a large team of that here. So really, people shouldn't limit themselves. If they see a job description that looks like, hey, that's a great fit for me, don't get hung up on exactly what your degree is in, right? I'm a mechanical engineer. My graduate research was all in combustion, right? Literally
okay,
in car engines,
okay.
and most people wouldn't go, well, that's a perfect alignment for medical devices, right? And 20 years later, I'm still working in medical devices. So
Yeah, it's the passion there, right?
yeah, exactly, exactly.
O- Okay, so one question that I'm sure, it's on top everyone's mind with the pandemic.
Sure.
What are some shifts that you have noticed within the industry and within the operations function and manufacturing?
Yeah, we so the pandemic's been interesting. We had healthcare in general is not a business that slows down.
Mm,
When last year in 2020, when the hospitals were slowing down in the US and Europe, we did see some slowdown in Boston Scientific, and it as fast as it slowed down, it came back, and it came back stronger, right? So one of the things is the resilience of the industry. It is not a cyclical industry at all,
mm,
and the pandemic has demonstrated that, right?
mm,
The other thing is we're an essential industry. So, throughout the pandemic, we needed our teams to come in because the world needs medical devices, right? I mean, people don't stop getting sick from having heart attacks, for example,
mm, mm,
because of the pandemic. So you had that sort of higher order calling of um, of ensuring that we could keep the factory running safely for all our employees, so that they could make the products that were required, and we were very successful at that. Right.
mm.
In general, medical devices are a clean room operation, so it's a very clean environment to work in anyway, which certainly helps us. And so, we shifted to really making sure that we had a extremely safe operation, but that we could keep running to supply the world with the products that they need. Because
Mm,
many of our products serve an acute demand. Someone has had a heart attack, they need treatment, right? You can't wait till the end of the pandemic.
yeah.
And then,
Mm,
on the less on the manufacturing side, but I think in general in medical
mm,
devices, a lot more of our training of doctors on how to use the products that has
mm,
started to move from in person to remote and digital, like our
mm.
interaction today, right? So that is shifting the way we bring many of our products to
Ah,
market.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And
fascinating
that will create
technology.
more jobs, right?
Absolutely, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
So what are some of the current hot jobs that are within the industry?
So we're always hiring engineers, we're always hiring technicians, we're always hiring people to run production.
Mm,
For us, because of some new products that we have coming, chemists, analytical chemists,
mm,
laboratory, various biological
mm,
backgrounds are
okay.
also really important and can be a little bit harder to find here, right? So
Mm,
microbiologists aren't as common in terms of the percentage of graduates here as they are, for example, the U.S.
mm.
Those are very hot jobs for us, and
Ah,
things like that analytical chemistry space. So chemists can do lots of things, right? They can work in
yeah.
petroleum, they can work in any kind of consumer products, but I think it's great to realize there are also places in the medical industry where there's a great fit.
Ah, wonderful, wonderful. Um, so, going back to your career progression, you started out as an engineer and, you were in automotive and then eventually you move into medical devices and dealing with
Sure.
all the different areas. Now, as job seekers and, employees, they grow their careers. Sometimes this question about should I be a generalist or should I be a
Mm,
specialist? So I
right,
get this question a lot as well, right? When I
right.
do career coaching. So what are your thoughts on that?
I would describe myself as a generalist.
Mm,
Um, I would say we have both career paths in the
Okay.
industry. So some
Okay.
people very focused on, working the R&D space or working in the operational engineering or production
Mm,
space, and their career ascension will be through that vertical. For
okay.
me, it's more of a personal thing, but for me, I've always wanted to try different things. But what I would say is, if you're going to be a generalist, be a specialist in what you do, right? So my assignments working in manufacturing automation, I was very, very deep in it, right? I mean,
Mm,
I knew what it meant and what it took and how to do it, right? I
mm,
did it for years. And then I moved to something totally different, project management, right? And
mm,
I spent years like refining that craft, right? And then I was starting a factory. So what I encourage people to do is, when you think of yourself as a generalist, think of yourself as, what are the experiences that I want that are going to build the picture of my career that will take me to where I want to go. So think about, what boxes do you need, right? If you're
mm,
in finance, do you want to do, managerial accounting, right? You want to do financial planning and analysis. You want to do, all the various things to make yourself ready to be a finance leader, right? So if you're, the same thing goes for me. I thought about, what are the experiences that I want that'll take me to where I wanted to go. I also have really enjoyed international experience, so that's been a personal goal for me and for my family. I
mm.
encourage people who maybe would never think about moving away from home or away from their country
Yeah.
to take a shot if you get the opportunity. People do not regret it. But I think it's a mindset change. The first time my wife and I moved, we moved from the US to Ireland. We were
Oh,
very nervous, right? And then
yes.
by the third day we were there, we realized it was going to be just a fantastic personal and professional experience. So anyway, back to your question. I think both career paths are valid, generalist
Mm,
or specialist. In technical fields, you see probably a little bit more specialist and a little bit less generalist.
mm.
In sort of management and leadership, you might see more generalist and specialist. Both are valid. Both can take you where you want to go, but just do it planfully, right?
Yeah, correct. Um, you brought up a very interesting insight to that question, right? Instead of just looking at the capabilities and how you're growing your career, you have expanded that question to think about the experience that you want to have, right?
Right,
And
right.
I think that's such a valuable thought and insight for our viewers out there because careers are not necessarily a linear path, right? It's not,
Yep.
step one, step two, step three. It could be step
Yeah.
one and then you deviate and then you come back, etc. Um, so what would be maybe your one-liner in your career that that you normally latch on, or it's your motto?
Yeah. So I might give you more than one.
Okay.
My first one, and I didn't realize this till I was probably, I don't know, 45, high 40s, right? I'm low 50s now. Is that your career is a marathon, not a sprint, right? So it is not a race to get to the top job or get
Mm,
to some very specific thing that you want. You need to think about it as, if you graduate college when you're 21, you're going to be working for 40 years, right? So even though when you're 21, being 35 years old feels like an eternity, it's not. You got a long way to go. So think about your career as a marathon and not a sprint, right? And I would also say that people should avoid chasing the money and the title versus
mm,
chasing a plan that's going to carry you through that marathon,
mm,
right? So where do you want to end up and how do you get there? Some of that conversation also needs to be what you don't want to do, right? When I ask
mm,
people what they want to do, sometimes they say, I'm not really sure exactly where I want to end up. My next question is, okay, think about what you don't want to do. That'll at least help you make your career decisions, because opportunities will come when you're not planning. Someone will ask you to take on a project or a job, and you need to be able to have a framework to think about that. So it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? Don't worry about title and money as your number one concern, right? Those things will come as you run that marathon. And then think about what you want to do and what you don't want to do. So I gave you three. You asked for one. Sorry.
Wonderful. That's a bonus for us there and for the viewers as well. And I just want to leverage on your international career, right?
Sure.
And people always look at, oh, if I'm general manager, or I mean marketing and all those glamorous jobs. That's where they can travel, right?
Yep.
And it was very interesting to look at your CV and see, the number of places that you've been,
Yep.
etc. And how would you advise our viewers out there, especially those who are trying to build their career in operations, to have
Yep.
this international career in operations?
Yeah. So first of all, for us, it's at all levels. Matter of fact,
Okay.
we'll be picking up fresh grads um, that we will be sending abroad to live for a year to train and learn some new processes and new equipment. So literally 20,
Wow.
whatever, 22 years old, however old a
Mm,
fresh grad is, getting an opportunity for international experience. So for us, it happens at all levels, right? And that includes people who aren't even coming out of college, right? It could
mm,
include technicians who need to go learn equipment, and we'll send them abroad for a year.
mm,
So those opportunities are there all the time. And my advice is that people really seriously consider it. What you don't think about is that, of course, the work is going to be good. If a company is going to invest, what ends up costing hundreds of thousands of dollars to move you abroad for a couple of
mm,
years, they're clearly going to give you good work, right?
mm,
So you know that the professional side is going to be good.
mm,
And then the second piece of it is the personal side, right? So imagine going and living in Ireland like I did, and every weekend being able to just, hey, you want to take a plane to Italy? Do you want to, right? I mean, think about those opportunities. So your personal life grows, your professional life grows when you do international experience. I think people get scared about leaving their routine, or maybe certain
mm,
people that they see every day, family, of
mm.
course, right? But a couple of years is going to go really fast, right? And your family will also be really excited to come visit you if you live in a cool place, right?
Yeah, yeah. And that goes back to your initial thought, right? You built your career based on experience, right?
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
just by title and not just, by going for the steps in the corporate ladder as per se, right?
exactly, exactly.
Wonderful, wonderful. Probably just to wrap up, one of my last question to you would be, how would you advise a young job seeker, right, that's coming
Yeah,
out into the industry? Say for instance, a young technician who comes from a small town, a suburb areas, and they are not familiar with the industry and they don't know what's in it for them.
yeah. I'm a person that looks for passion, right? So
Uh-huh.
if you've got the core skills, a technician's a great example, right?
Mm,
I mean, I grew up working on cars and motorcycles as a kid, and like, I could teach myself to work on anything. And I think a technician's a perfect example, right? If you were working on an oil rig before, you can come in and learn automation in the medical device industry, right? You
mm,
absolutely have that capability. So I think
mm,
you show that passion about how you can come in, learn things, and
mm,
solve problems,
mm,
and be confident with that. And I also think there's no perfect job on paper, right? You
mm,
want to get into the industry you want, or the company that you want,
mm,
and then you have plenty of opportunities in Boston Scientific or any other company to move around, right? So
mm,
come in, and maybe for the first couple of years you're doing one thing and working on one product, and you're like, wow, I'd really like to go over there. That's cool, right? Stay with a company and move over and build your experience. So I think people need to, again, just be confident in their capabilities, bring it in and go, hey, I can solve problems, I can learn this stuff if I don't know it, or maybe they already know it, but that's a key piece, right? And we recruit from everywhere, we recruit from all industries. It's that ability to solve problems that's critical.
Wonderful, wonderful. And if I could summarize, the three main key points that I got away from
Sure.
yourself, then and that I learned from you is also one, having the passion in what you do, passion for learning, passion for trying, courage, etc. And also, looking at experience instead of just, career paths, right? For
Yep.
as you grow your career as well. And
Yep.
last but not least, right? It's really that inward belief in yourself that you are capable, more capable than you believe yourself confident to be.
Yep. Yep.
That's such a cool thing that we have learned today.
Yeah, no, you summed it up perfectly.
Thank you, Dave. And I believe we have come to the end of our conversation. It has been such an honor to hear your sharing and insights of both the industry, your career advice, and also, the practical tips that you have offered our viewers. I hope that viewers out there, you truly take away these gems from Dave Mitchell. He is the Vice President and Managing Director for Boston Scientific, based in Penang. I encourage you to connect with all our guests here today, and be on the Job Street Virtual Career Fair from 14th of October to 16th of October. There will be so much for you to explore. So thank you. Stay safe and take care.
Thank you, Shireen.
Thank you, Dave. Bye bye.
Bye now.